Hey all, Scott here. You know, people don't get that anymore. Combining the words Scott, all, hey, and here just doesn't connect with modern word hearers. That's why I'm going to change up the first 4 words I say to everybody to be understandable to more people. Here, I have a lot of options to shift through. Hi gang, it's Scott. Welcome to Scottsburg. Everybody? No, just Scott. Guys, look, a me! I played Fling Smash. People of you. Hey, anybody up for tennis? I bought a hat. I'm talking about reboots. I like that one. Remember this? No, you don't. He had black hair instead. Take it. You got a beloved franchise on your hands. Scrap it. Start over again. That's the key to success, at least with most media now. Reboots are a hot ticket item these days. They're constantly getting pumped out within the television and film industries, but video game reboots are what we're talking today. I think reboots are totally understandable from a business perspective. After a series has been around for a while and there's a big fat number at the end of the title, apparently, massive turnoff. Mario Party 10, well, I have to play 1 through 9 before that. I mean, I'm completely guilty of this mindset. If there's a game I'm interested in, but it's a sequel, most of the time I'll want to make sure I either play the previous games or at the very least have a good understanding of them. That's why we see so many new games from old franchises with no number, no new subtitle, just the series name. Easily the biggest trope of the video game reboot, getting rid of all that garbage. Modern Warfare 4, nobody knows what the hell that is. Here's how it should be. I cannot wait to see the next couple Modern Warfares. Whether it's to give a series a fresh start or because the publisher's worried people won't buy into a game called Doom 4, taking a pre-existing franchise and making a new entry that is newcomer friendly, ignores previous continuity, starts anew and has a boring stupid title to appeal to both potential new fans and longtime fans alike, that's like a game developer's favorite pastime. Reboots just make sense. They can appeal to newcomer and veteran fans. However, they're susceptible to numerous problems, not retaining what made the franchise special in the first place, changing too much, ruining gameplay or characters. You have to find the right balance between keeping what made the series beloved to begin with and appealing to more people. And now reboots have been around for a while, especially with film, so it really isn't a new concept. However, I'd argue reboots in video games started to become more common in the Xbox, PS2, and GameCube era, but really started to become a thing the generation after that with the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and Wii. A lot of people were either just getting into gaming or getting back into gaming around that, so to rely heavily on previous titles wasn't gonna cut it. The Sonic continuity was too much to handle. Now this is a good starting point. Games would make a clean break with the title and just label something as the title of the series, so then more people would feel like they could pick it up. They didn't need prior knowledge, they could just start the series here, which is everything a reboot strives to be. Sometimes we got reinventions of a game in a more modern style, a return to form, or the best thing a reboot can ever strive to be, gritty. As gamers got older, so did a lot of their tastes, so it was a hip thing to take an E-rated franchise and M it all up. I always looked at Bomberman and said, well, that's not right, where's the angst? I just got back from Spencer's Gifts, I'm ready for this. Bomberman Act Zero is possibly the most definitive way to not reboot a series. I guess Hudson Soft wanted to take Bomberman and turn it into something that could rival Gears of War with its persistent use of brown and gray. This game knows how to use no colors, and they redesigned one of the most iconic characters in all of gaming and turned him into something your mom wouldn't approve of. Bionic Commando, so this technically is a sequel to the original Bionic Commando on NES. You might have played this and asked, what happens next? Well, obviously this. But its name is just Bionic Commando. It came out 20 years after the original. The tone is way more angsty. I think it's fair to call this a reboot. Well, I think it's just okay. The only thing I ever remember about this game is that it gave Nathan Spencer wife arm. What a twist. Your dead wife has been a part of your robotic arm throughout the entire adventure. That's something worthy of being on the back of the box. This was when Capcom was desperately trying to inject as much North America into their games as possible to appeal to audiences outside of Japan, which meant reboots. And with that, here comes DMC Devil May Cry, one of the most controversial reboots in all of video games. Not because it was necessarily bad or anything, it's alright, but it treated Devil May Cry's legacy just so poorly. Capcom enlisted Ninja Theory to develop the game rather than developing it themselves and pushed them to make the game the way it is to help DMC reach bigger audiences. That meant turning the main character Dante into the most generic looking video game protagonist out there. A lot of these reboots like to take all the character out of character designs and replace them with these college dropouts. I guess with a more generic looking character, I can relate to him more. See, that was why I could never get into Devil May Cry. I just couldn't relate to Dante. He had white hair. DMC was okay, it just felt like it was rebooting the series for reasons that made no sense, taking things that actually made the series unique and changing them because they thought those were the problems with the series. Turned out they weren't. And then Capcom released Devil May Cry 5, which ignored everything DMC did and was just a direct follow-up to Devil May Cry 4. Now, instead of being considered a reboot, DMC is more so considered an alternate timeline version of Devil May Cry now, mainly because it's hard to be a reboot to a series when the series just deboots back. Capcom was all about these reboots for a while. There was a Mega Man X reboot in the works that ended up being cancelled. Maverick Hunter, think of something along the lines of Metroid Prime, how that took a 2D game and went first person with it. Maverick Hunter was pretty much going to be a first person Mega Man X game, but much darker and grim. So imagine if the Bomberman X Zero guys made a Mega Man X game. Honestly, I think this could have been okay, but I kinda doubt it. It was probably gonna be bad. I'm also thinking of this in terms of how well Metroid Prime turned out. Now, that's a reboot done right. After a long hiatus, they took the Metroid series and threw it in a new dimension and perspective, while retaining what made Metroid Metroid. The development team of Maverick Hunter was made up of some people who worked on Prime, so I think this project had a bit more potential than some may say. But it was probably a good thing it was cancelled. This was trying to take X and turning him into something like Master Chief. I get why they redesign characters like this, to get rid of that cartoony, kinda cutesy vibe and truly make a Mega Man game that you'd be proud to say you played last night at school. But a lot of the people who are only interested in the dark, gritty, mature games aren't really open to trying new things, and thus they aren't guaranteed to give a piss about a gritty Mega Man X reboot. And just saying that out loud, what guy who only plays dark and gritty mature games would actively care about a Mega Man X reboot? On top of that, something like this is less likely to appeal to actual Mega Man X fans because it's so radically different from the original games. I think it's fair to say, while I think this game may have had some potential, it would have flopped hard commercially, I guarantee. How about a gritty reboot of a World War II shooter? If you want grit, you can always take a look at EA's Medal of Honor reboot in 2010. The original Medal of Honor games were pioneers of the modern first-person war shooters. Then EA asked, you know Call of Duty? Medal of Honor 2010 has absolutely none of its own spunk. It really gives you no reason to play it in comparison to something like Call of Duty. It did get a sequel, Medal of Honor Warfighter. That subtitle can be used with almost any FPS. Of course, there are reboots that have no business existing. You know who needed a completely new origin story? Spyro the Dragon. The kids wouldn't understand any of this. He needs a head. However, reboots can be good, I swear. God of War PS4 is one of the most radical reboots out there. It took a hack and slash franchise with a fixed camera and made a game that defied all the odds and was not that. This is a weird reboot the more I think about it. So Kratos is still the main character, but God of War PS4 switches from the Greek mythology of the original series to Norse mythology, but apparently this is still the same Kratos. He just decided to change mythologies on us. I mean, sure. The reboot, however, is much more of a cinematic story-focused adventure game compared to the original titles. It's like most of the other first-party PlayStation games. While God of War PS4 still retains hack-and-slash elements, they're definitely toned down to make way for a much more character-driven story. I can appreciate that, and I think the characters pop much more with its changing gameplay. It's just this feels so similar to a lot of the other games Sony Studios are making that I can't help but think the original style was more unique in comparison. This felt much more like a game called God of War. So whatever, I still like playing this more than God of War 3. Wolfenstein has been through so many reboots now, I don't know which of these is real. One of the most influential series ever when it comes to first-person shooters. Well, the first major reboot was Return to Castle Wolfenstein in 2001, followed up by Wolfenstein from 2009, and then rounding things out with Wolfenstein The New Order in 2015. Return to Castle Wolfenstein was pretty great at the time, and Wolfenstein The New Order and the games that followed it are definitive modern Wolfenstein games in my opinion. I think these are fantastic modern representations of the series. Then something happened in 2009. Remember my opinion of Medal of Honor 2010? That kind of stays true with Wolfenstein 2009. This is such a nothing game. There's nothing that fun or remarkable about it. The Nazis did do some crazy stuff with gravity though.
Carried some unusual munitions that canceled gravity when it detonated.
Nope, Hitler. Guys, I finally started up Kid Icarus Uprising, and that means, yep, I finally lost use of my right hand. Kid Icarus was an NES title, which later got a sequel on the Game Boy, but that was it. And with Pit's inclusion in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, people started to question why this series never made it past the Game Boy. It seemed to have just as much potential as all the other series that started up around then. But then finally, Smash Bros. Director Masahiro Sakurai put his foot down and made a new Kid Icarus game himself that played nothing like a Kid Icarus game. It's fair to call Uprising a reboot because it basically treats itself as a brand new franchise rather than the third game in the series. Sure, there are characters and enemies and some plot lines from the first two games, but by and large, this was a completely new take on Kid Icarus, and it was one of the most thrilling arthritic experiences of my life. It's a good game I hate. It's held back by its annoying control scheme, but other than that, It's a great time. But that reminds me of a type of reboot that has a special place in my heart. The full-blown retro revivals, bringing back a retro game series in all of its old school glory. This was a huge trend that started in the 360 days. With the aid of digital distribution with Xbox Live Arcade, PlayStation Network, and WiiWare, it became totally viable to produce new games and old school franchises. You could whip them together on the cheap, charge them bucks for them, and throw them online. These were reboots in the sense that they went back to what people loved about these games originally and got rid of the extra junk added to later games. I'm just really fond of these types of games because they bring me back to the glory of Xbox Live Arcade. I miss this so much. Back when companies could just squeak out a remake of the original Bionic Commando, no wife arm included, Mega Man 9 and 10, Double Dragon Neon, Hydro Thunder Hurricane, Rocket Knight for like 10 to 15 bucks. There were so many revivals of classic games and it just brings me back to a much simpler time, when stuff like this was just far more common to get thrown online for a couple of bucks. Now, I mean, something like Bomberman R, yeah, if that released in 2008, it would be like 15 bucks max on Xbox Live Arcade. And now, you see, that's a little thing us people who are talking about reboots right now call bull. My favorites were always the Pac-Man Championship Edition games. These were definitely the reboot back to basics Pac-Man games after they experimented with 3D platformers for a while. God, dude, I wish these games counted towards caloric intake. I want to stuff my face with these things. They bring back the standard maze format for Pac-Man, but they bring all this modern spectacle to it all, alongside gameplay mechanics that wouldn't be possible in the 80s. However, these retro revivals didn't just start happening during this era. They've been the norm since, I'd say, the mid-90s, when they tried to take old school gaming icons and rebrand them for a new age. Space Raiders, a reboot of Space Invaders. Yeah, this is one of the most forgotten games in the GameCube and PS2 libraries. Finally, a Space Invaders the kids can get behind. They didn't think a Space Invaders game could have partial nudity. Thankfully, since then, they found much more appropriate ways to leverage the Space Invaders brand, but Space Raiders will always live on in my heart until I forget about it for a few years, i.e., in about 3 minutes.
TBH, the elixir!
Elixir? I brought Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper is the elixir.
She moved to New York to follow a dream.
Welcome to the Empire State.
And then she's the victim of a violent murder.
New York detectives have seen it all,
You want to give that family justice?
and only we can take you to the scene of the crime.
The person who did this murder was very familiar with the Opera House.
It takes a city of dreams to create these nightmares.
It was a world-famous pizzeria.
Does this have something to do with the mafia?
New York Homicide, a new series, premieres Saturday, January 1st, only on Oxygen True Crime.
Ninja Gaiden is a solid example of a well-executed reboot of an old-school franchise. You go from tough-as-nails NES platformers to tough-as-nails hack-and-slashes. Yeah, it did get a genre change, but the spirit of Ninja Gaiden was still there. Now, one of my biggest pet peeves with reboots are the titles. I mean, if naming the 9th game in the Mortal Kombat series Mortal Kombat really got more people to buy it, okay. It's just when a new game is revealed and the title is revealed to be just the name of the series, I roll my eyes a bit. Now we have to start referring to these games by unofficial titles or following the title with a year or the system it's on. Mortal Kombat 9, Doom 2016, God of War PS4, Tomb Raider 2013, Punch-Out Wii. Those aren't the official titles, but that's just what we have to call them, and that's sort of annoying, especially when two games are completely different, yet have the same title. Saying, oh, I love Prey. That could mean anything. The title DMC Devil May Cry never made much sense to me marketing-wise. Like, DMC is kind of more of an abbreviation fans use to talk about the Devil May Cry games, so just calling the game DMC doesn't make much sense if they were looking to have this appeal to more people. I feel like it would have done better if they just straight up called it Devil May Cry. I adore Tomb Raider 2013, but the title being full out Tomb Raider doesn't feel the most fitting to me. You do raid tombs in the game, but it's not the main focus. I think it would have made more sense to just call it Lara Croft or something, because it's focusing on her origin story, and one of the last things I think of with this game is honestly the tomb raiding. Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. One thing I will never understand about this game is its name. They wanted this to be a fresh start for Sonic, so this is what Sonic was always meant to be. I don't get that because Sonic 06's gameplay is pretty similar to the Sonic Adventure titles. Why were they acting like this was Sonic's rebirth and deserved to be called simply Sonic the Hedgehog, when it was pretty much just a third Sonic Adventure? Plus, they re-released the first game on Game Boy Advance the same day, and that was just called Sonic the Hedgehog, and that was bad too! Sega had a lot of nerve to release two completely different bad games with the same name on the same day. The Punch-Out games. Alright, how many times can you reuse the same title? Can you just call the Wii one Punch-Out in the Face? However, sometimes I do think it's fair to use the generic series as a title, and when a series is gone for a long time, the lack of a subtitle or number kind of makes sense. I mean, why would you call Killer Instinct 2013 Killer Instinct 3? Most of the general population doesn't even know games called Killer Instinct 1 or 2 ever existed. Reboots can be seen as cash grabs or annoying to longtime fans. And they most certainly can be that, but I think we still gotta look at some of these from more creative perspectives. It can be incredibly frustrating and complicated to be tied to continuity from years worth of content, especially if current developers didn't work on previous titles in a franchise. A series can become worn out and beaten to death, but they still may have potential. The characters, the gameplay, the setting are all beloved, and you want to create more things around them, but you don't want to be tied down to the limitations of what came before. Sometimes it's okay to let go of the past and to tweak characters or settings, or even completely change them while still retaining the heart of the original source material. That's how some of the greatest stories and characters of all time evolve. A story told hundreds of years ago changes over time depending on who's telling it. While reboots are kind of given a bad rep most of the time, I think a lot of it has to do with the terms reboot and revival being used to death these days. They're annoying to hear. I'd recommend using the terms reimagining or a new take when describing these types of installments. I think those terms have a lot less of a corporate, we're bringing back old you love because we don't have any original new ideas ourselves feel to them.
Reboots can be groan-worthy sometimes, but I think they can be totally understandable and necessary. You can't make 20 installments of a game series called Need for Speed without like 5 reboots. You just can't.
Hey y'all, Scott here, quick. What's the first thing you think of when you think mysterious? Mysteries, right. There are so many questions in life that are left unanswered, like what's the point, why bother, and who cares? That's why I'm scouring the closet for answers to gaming's greatest mysteries, like, didn't Luigi say in Mario Golf? Alright, we have the answer to why the Xbox One cases are the way they are, and oh hey, check this out, it's my first fan art of Madden. Okay, and yeah, I got invited to a dinner party by Chet Shaft. He used to be my manager when I worked at Games on a Shelf, and then I quit / ran the store out of business. I think I put this with all the other letters I don't want to deal with.
You have been cordially invited to a dinner party celebrating us all making it this far in life. I knew living would get me somewhere someday. I mean, me and Chet aren't friends, we're more so he hates me friends, but this dinner party seems to be an apology for lashing out at me.
You think you know how to run a business? I know a guy with a NASA shirt, okay? I earned this job!
I miss the lack of trauma. I should probably stop by for just a bit. Now, under normal circumstances, that means no stupid Nintendo game talk. I'm gonna be a little too busy at the dinner party. But I thought ahead. I pre-recorded myself talking about gaming mysteries.
Hey all, Scott here.
Oh god, I sound like that?
As a player of all things video games, I think it's fair to say I deserve answers. Mysteries are what keeps humanity at the edge of their seats. It's absolutely terrifying knowing you don't know something. Is the Loch Ness Monster real or was it just a fist? But with video games, these things can be so complex and have such lengthy histories to them that either some things are just left unexplained or theories and urban legends arise. These mysteries can range from, can you jump the flagpole in Super Mario Bros. To, is Luigi dead? One of the most notorious urban legends in video games was with Super Mario 64 and Luigi in that game, and it wasn't whether he said or not, because this isn't Mario Golf. He wasn't even there. See, up until Mario 64, we've had a pretty good ratio of games with Luigi to games without Luigi. He was playable in all the mainline Marios prior to 64. And then priorities shifted and Luigi wasn't playable. He didn't appear in the game whatsoever, not even mentioned. So of course speculation started to get a little wild, and I still have my picket sign from the protests. Why wasn't Luigi in Mario 64? Was he just that well hidden in the game? Well, ever since the game launched, many fans noticed this sign in the courtyard of Peach's castle. Now, under normal circumstances, it's gibberish, but when we slide the Virgin Gogs on, we can make out that it potentially says L is real 2401. Now, what does that mean?
No sex for me, thanks.
Many took this as a hint, proof that Luigi was real alright and he was in Mario 64 after all. So let's dissect this phrase. L is real 2401. Well, Luigi is real, and the only thing in Mario 64 with a number that high would be the number of coins in the entire game. After all, you get a star for collecting 100 coins in each level. That lends credibility to the fact there could be a reward for collecting every single coin in the whole game, and that reward would be related to the letter L. Problem is, there isn't 2,401 coins in Mario 64, so that's a problem. And as a bonus, collecting them all doesn't do anything. However, we can look into this even harder. L is real 2401 may just correlate to Paper Mario's release on the Nintendo 64. Luigi was real in that game, I saw him. And 2401 was the release date in North America. Kinda. So it didn't release on February 4th, 2001, it released on February 5th, 2001. Well, if this theory holds any truth, then Nintendo knew what the general release date of Paper Mario was gonna be back when Super Mario 64 released. That terrifies me. Why were they planning that far ahead? What were their goals? So why is L real 2401? I have no idea, and frankly, this blank is so blurry that you can come up with various other phrases it may look like. It's one of those things where since a lot of people were told it reads L is real 2401, that's what a lot of people see. I don't know what the Aka Room people's deal is. Luigi was planned for Mario 64 in a potential multiplayer mode, but was pushed off to the side. He was playable in the remake Super Mario 64 DS though. All of life's problems are solved when a character's playable in Mario 64 DS. Now, a lot of mysteries within gaming can be classified under conspiracy theories. Like, was Link dead throughout the entirety of The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask?
No.
It was between this and the moon landing. I chose believing the less supported one. Majora's Mask is one dark Zelda title, and most dads would not let their daughters date this game. It's creepy, it's depressing, and many have discovered how the story of the game correlates with death, what happens before and after death, dealing with death, and many have theorized that Link himself was dead and the entire game is basically his afterlife. There are lots of theories like this in games, some of which have turned out to be true, like how Super Mario Bros. 3 was supposed to be a play. You see how it opens up with a curtain rising, various platforms cast a shadow and have bolts on them like they were constructed as part of a set. Whenever a level ends, it's almost as if Mario was running off stage. This was a fan theory for the longest time until it was actually confirmed by Shigeru Miyamoto. Now, if this was an actual play, I could sit down and watch. Who wrote this?
What's the recipe for surprising the kids, treating yourself, and ditching dish duty? You're looking at it. Order your Pizza Hut faves like Original Pan, Original Stuffed Crust, and more at pizzahut.com. No one out-pizzas the Hut.
Wait a minute.
5 breadsticks for my triple treat. 3 layers deep, 10 Cinnabon mini rolls to eat, and the pizza plus another pizza.
The triple treat box, only from Pizza Hut.
Hi, thanks for joining the Payne Motors quarterly earnings call. And now I'll turn you over to our new CEO.
The numbers last quarter were rough. Mea culpa. Well, not mea culpa, actually. Vea culpa. Let's sell the crap out of this car.
It looks like the car was assembled by a spider on LSD who also had bad taste.
It tested well.
American Auto premieres January 4th on NBC, and watch 2 episodes now on Peacock.
Chucky will return.
Welcome home.
Until then, watch the hit series from the beginning, streaming now on Peacock.
Oh, hey y'all, Scott Wozniak, dinner partier here.
Jeb, vegan.
Terry Lessler, veganer.
Officer Steelwool, justice supporter.
Rex Mose, school dance chaperone and historian.
Wendy's employee.
Oh, so how do you all know Chet?
He was a former vegan, and he bought milk.
That son of a bitch!
I pulled him over for money laundering.
I'm chaperoning his dinner party.
He stole a Baconator. That son of a bitch!
I tanked the story he managed, and he convinced me to quit one of the only jobs I ever had. Now I'm living off of unemployment checks in fear.
Hi, Chet Shaft, former Games on a Shelf manager, current doer of all things nothing. Welcome to the Shaft Family Estate's first annual dinner party, my largest priority at the moment. Due to some prior obligations, I can't be there with you tonight, but please feel free to help yourself to an old Shaft family recipe.
This is Jimmy John's.
But then we go from theories to just the unexplained. Parts of games that were just never understood and remained elusive for so long. In GoldenEye 007, on the very first level, players noticed a building in the distance. You can just barely see it, and rumors floated around about being able to grab a boat and make your way over there, potentially getting some rewards. But no, this area is more or less placed there for show. While the developer's original intent was exactly what fans speculated, it was scrapped and just kept there as a scene setter. If that island didn't exist, the immersion would crumble. Everybody has their happy place. They wouldn't make the t-shirts if that wasn't the case, and mine is Shiverburn Galaxy in Super Mario Galaxy 2. Such a fun level. There's fire and ice. Can't ask for much more than this. Sometimes I like to hit up to go into first-person view and look up at the mountains. Everybody has their happy place, and mine is Fleet Glide Galaxy in Super Mario Galaxy 2. These ominous figures appear in Shiverburn Galaxy if you look up in first person. 3 beings just looking at you throughout the entire level. It doesn't matter where you are, as long as you can look up at the mountains, they'll be there, watching you. Now in Super Mario 3D Land, at the end of World 4-4, if you wait around, someone or something will fade in and fade out. Shiverburn Galaxy, I can sort of see these guys as a weird little thing accidentally getting thrown into the game. You know, they're ink blot tests. In 3D Land, this was a completely deliberate addition where one of the developers said, I want to make some kids themselves.
The Shaft family would like to express their gratitude to all attendees of the dinner party tonight. Terry Lessler and Jet, thank you for your strong acts of veganism. Carrots wouldn't be the same without you. Rick Mose, without you, I wouldn't be an alcoholic.
It's Rex!
Officer Steel Wool, thank you for your years of service. Wendy's employee, thank you for your years of service. And Scott, without you, I wouldn't have lost my job at Games on a Shelf. Thank you, everybody. Please help yourself to a complimentary table knife and dig in.
He's dead!
Alright, listen guys, I'm not one to leave the party early, but when people start getting murdered, that's where I draw the line.
Yeah, somebody's been murdered. Yeah. Yeah, can you pick that up on the way home?
No, okay, we can leave. Okay, Chet said the party's over at 9. He's dead. We at least owe him this.
I'll stay. I'm free.
Listen, we can get the murder stench out of here by listening to some good old-fashioned video game mysteries.
Yeah, of course. Let's talk a series with just as many mysteries as it has dead civilians.
Somebody
died!
Grand Theft Auto San Andreas has a little bit of something for everybody. Gunplay, driving, not Bigfoot. The existence of Bigfoot in San Andreas has always been a huge rumor. Apparently within the forest, you could find Bigfoot lurking around. This is also a game where ghost cars can chase after you. A developer on the game stated that Bigfoot was in there at one point, but he was told to take it out for the final release. However, there's supposedly a 10% chance of seeing Bigfoot. There's also no Bigfoot model in the game's code, so I don't know about this one.
Alright, so we all hated Chet, right?
Yeah.
He's a born-again carnivore, he's led many to unemployment, he's money laundered, he's wronged all of us. Who's to say one of us isn't the killer?
That's right. If we can't leave, we might as well find out who viciously murdered Chet.
Oh, I love puzzles.
Guys, listen, one of us may be a murderer, but we're all human at the end of the day. Let's just listen to some gaming mysteries about Luigi and call it a night.
Wasn't that the guy who said Mario Golf?
Luigi's Mansion. Scary, right? It's my go-to box art to piss myself to. Well, there are a few parts of the game that have some sinister and chilling implications. Like, that is what you call a dead baby. But there was one part in the third area of the game. After a bolt of lightning strikes, we can see Luigi's shadow is hanging in the air, implying that Luigi is hanging himself. Now, was this an intentionally chilling addition to the game, or was it a glitch due to the game's camera being at an angle it's not usually used to, which accidentally pushed Luigi's shadow up higher than usual? Huh.
This is great. It's like a murder mystery with the murder and the mystery.
You're taking this pretty well, man.
Who's to say you're not the killer? You're acting pretty carefree right now for someone whose life's at stake.
It's a murder, not a tax audit. We'll be fine.
Well, what about the Wendy's employee? Nobody ever suspects the Wendy's employee.
Well, what about Steel Wool? He has a gun.
Jim has a knife.
Yeah, for fun, not for murder.
Guys, deep down, we can all be a murderer if we want. So let's just get down to the bottom of this. By a show of hands, who here murdered Chet? Damn it.
Some mysteries aren't too sinister and were just unknown aspects of games, like jumping the flagpole in Super Mario Bros. I mean, when I played this game, I would sometimes think, I'm gonna do it. And guess what? I've never been able to live that down. This game is engineered to make it hard to jump over the flagpole. I mean, it makes sense. What does anybody gain from that? Now, a famous level where you can do that is 3-3. With these platforms, it's more than possible to waste an afternoon. But the one people were always wondering about was World 1-1, the very first level. Is it possible? Yes, it is. You, Nintendo. It's all due to a glitch here. We gotta stand on this block here and wait for the Koopa Troopa to fall down the hole. Jumping up here at the right moment will hit him. And then he'll come back and we have to follow him to the end of the level while grabbing a mushroom. Then we jump at the right moment to jump off of him to get over the flagpole. There are lots of glitches that have their own mystery behind them, like with Pokemon Red and Blue with the Pokemon Missing No, which stands for missing number. It's a glitch where the game basically has no idea what Pokemon should appear, but it's kind of taken on a life of its own. People refer to Missing No as if it's an actual Pokemon when it's just a jumble of code. Super Smash Bros. Melee's Daisy trophy has a third eye on the back of her head. I mean, I wasn't expecting that, but I'm not surprised.
Listen, maybe the murderer isn't one of us. Maybe the murderer is hiding somewhere in the building. We should split up into groups. That way, we can't all get murdered.
I like it. Feeling lucky tonight.
Okay, so if any of you die, you have to tell me, okay?
Wait, look!
It looks like whoever the killer is had dark hair.
Well, good, that narrowed it down a bit.
Final Fantasy VII features the death of Aerith. However, many rumors floated around about being able to stop that from happening and keep her in your party. You cannot. A lot of these mysteries are formed by what fans want to see, or what the game says and just never elaborates on. Street Fighter 2, Ryu says the infamous phrase, "You must defeat Shenlong to stand a chance." Now, I'm sure the localization team at the time said, "Oh yeah, people will like this. It really makes Ryu seem determined to win." When in reality, everybody said, "Who the f*** is Shenlong?" It was a mistranslation of Ryu stating, "If you cannot overcome the Shoryuken, you cannot win." There was a lot of mystery surrounding who Shenlong was for the longest time, with the magazine EGM just refusing to put out the flames. They were well known for their April Fool's hoaxes, and one of them happened to be details on how to find Shenlong and some background to the character. Capcom themselves have joked about the character, fake announcing him for Street Fighter 4, and similarly, the original Mortal Kombat featured some extra code, Ermac, and many thought Ermac was a secret character. They added him eventually.
Alrighty, so now that we're all alone, we're all friends here.
Who the are you?
We're just gonna cut to the chase. Were you the murderer?
The only thing I kill is not abstinence.
So it's possible you killed him.
That's impossible. I hate murder.
So do I, but you don't see me bragging about it.
You know, that's it. I've had it. Good luck not murdering people. Murderers.
Tomb Raider was infamous for the rumor of the nude code, a secret cheat code that would make the character Lara Croft completely nude for players 13 and up. Yeah, that just doesn't work. Lara Croft was a sex symbol in gaming, and the idea of a PlayStation 1 character naked, well, who doesn't like that? The developers always teased fans about the code, making it obvious that it was very unlikely it actually existed, but never fully denying its existence either, obviously to keep people desperately wondering. It was later confirmed that a nude code never existed.
Yeah, I know I might get murdered tonight, but I don't care. Who the ever thought this was real? I died! Lung cancer. The murderer not only killed Shed, but peer pressured Jeb into death.
He was like that when I got here.
Sonic CD features a sound test option after inputting a code. When we're at the sound test, we can listen to all the sounds and music in the game, and if we select these specific options and hit start, I just wanted to listen to music. This screen is infamous and incredibly bizarre. We have 24 Sonics with a human face. Somebody wanted this. Now, of course, with the mustache, it's obvious this is supposed to be Sonic fused with Mario. The Japanese text translates to Fun is Infinite, Sega Enterprises, image by Majin. Now, Majin apparently means the devil. I knew something was up with this game. In actuality, Majin refers to Masato Nishimura, as Majin was his childhood nickname, so it's fine. The screen is fine. I mean, it's not like the screen is gonna kill me at a dinner party or anything, so it's fine.
It's a common saying.
The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past's biggest mystery for many people was the existence of the Chris Houlihan room, a room named after the winner of a Nintendo Power contest. You can get to it in a few different ways, and it's just filled with rupees. Yeah, that's cool or whatever. I want to see him in Smash Brothers as much as the next guy, but what about a secret that's not only in a Zelda game, but numerous other Nintendo games as well? Totaka's Song is a little ditty normally hidden in games composed by Kazumi Totaka. Luigi's Mansion, Mario Paint, Link's Awakening, Yoshi's Story, Mario Land 2, it's hidden in so many games. But there are a few games Totaka has worked on where it still hasn't been found. Many have thought the sound of the tennis ball hitting the racket in Wii Sports was Totaka's Song. If you play each hit together, it may sound like it, but that may be due to your brain telling you to think it's playing Totaka's Song. Weirdly enough, a game he straight up directed Wii Music apparently doesn't have Totaka's Song in there at all. I mean, it may be hiding in there, but I think we know everything Wii Music ever had to say. It has nothing to hide.
Pretty cool, right?
Terry's dead.
Great. Now there's only 4 people listening.
Now there's only one thing more addictive than reading actual mysteries about video games.
Nicotine?
Reading fake mysteries about video games. The creepypasta is big here on the internet. It's all about using one of these to scare the out of some kids. These are internet scary stories, and lots of them have to do with video games. They almost always have to do with some kid buying a used copy of a game and it's haunted. There's disturbing imagery and weird things happening while playing the game. What the hell are these ghost priorities?
Alright, we should just call the police already. We should just draw from a hat, figure out who's the murderer.
Yeah, I'm getting real tired of trying to figure out who the murderer is. If somebody just wants to step up and be the murderer so we can all go home, I'm all for it.
Alright, Scott, Steel Wolf. Rex, you're dead.
But while creepypastas are fake mysteries about video games, how about real-life mysteries about video games? In 2007, Madden 08 released to the masses, but weirdly enough, it got prequels each year prior. Madden 1999 released and was the first one to do so without Uncle Madden on the cover. No. This one featured an athlete, and it's been a tradition for almost every athlete who made the Madden cover to soon after get injured. This is the Madden curse, and if we're not careful enough, it'll get us too. Who would have thought Madden on your chest could lead to injuries?
Maybe there's a gas leak or something. Maybe that's why everybody's dying. Thanks, I was talking. It was you! Take off your mask, who are you? I never would have guessed!
It's time you meet your end.
Getting murdered is the least of my concerns right now. Why did you do it?
Shet deserved it, he wandered. I was too shy to mention that I was the one that killed him, so I thought it'd be easier to kill everyone.
Really? 5 homicides and that's your reason?
Make that 6.
You ever hear of the Madden curse?
Oh, my foot.
I did it. I solved the mystery.
I have seen a lot of murders in my day, and all 6 of them were today. The guys are all getting treated for murder at the hospital. They should all be fine. I'm pretty happy nothing happened to me, though. I have jury duty tomorrow, which means I can't die. If I don't show up, I'll go to prison.
At SteelSeries, we make the headsets, mice, and keyboards that the world's best gamers win the most with. And we've been doing it since way back. It's up to you how far you go, but whatever you do, go for glory.
She moved to New York to follow a dream.
Welcome to the Empire State.
And then she's a victim of a violent murder.
New York detectives have seen it all.
You want to give that family justice.
And only we can take you to the scene of the crime.
The person who did this murder was very familiar with the Opera House.
It takes a city of dreams to create these nightmares.
It was a world-famous pizzeria.
Does this have something to do with the mafia?
New York Homicide, a new series, premieres Saturday, January 1st, only on Oxygen True Crime.
These are the employees' cars.
You can do whatever you want to something if it's on your property.
Legally speaking, that's not...
Let's go make a car.
What are you doing to my car? Stealing your hubcaps. It's fine. I'm the new CEO.
American Auto, January 4th on NBC. And watch 2 episodes now on Peacock.
Hey all, Scott here. Oh, don't worry. This one's my primary Wii U, and these are my Wii U's in case I get lasagna on this one.
Who doesn't love having like all the consoles in the world? You can play any game you like, they all have different sized power adapters and video cables, and they're all huge and take up so much room, and what is this, an electric bill? There's a virgin tax?
Should probably unplug one of these.
I hate how video games or products were just expected to either throw away or keep everything we'd ever need to use them. Like, the only way you can play Deadman's Quest is to buy the PlayStation 3 hardware plus a PlayStation Move controller. That's up. Why can't I play these old games on the box I already have? Instead, I have to keep a GameCube on standby. But the thing is, some game consoles have us covered, and it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, and I've seen 4 Wii U's plugged in at once. Backwards compatibility is something everybody wants, but nobody will use. Having your new game console be able to play your old collection of games is wildly convenient. I mean, that means out of the box, it has a vast library of existing titles. And not only that, but it's easier to warrant buying a new console and selling your old one. You can still play your old games, plus new ones as well. Yup, backwards compatibility sure is great, which is why God doesn't want us to have it. Backwards compatibility is something the video game industry thinks they want to do, and then they take it away and bring it back, give up, try again. It's not a standard. Some console generations have nothing but backwards compatible consoles, and then the next era comes along and they wipe our memories. Playing PlayStation 1 games on a PlayStation 4? Bull. That can't happen. I'm a man of science, not of God. Nobody wants to be told all these things they bought over the years are obsolete and can't be used anymore. One of the biggest movements I was a part of was when Apple changed iPhone plugs. So to get a new console where none of my old stuff works on it, that stings. I can't be alone with wanting just one box to play all games underneath my TV. I love the different consoles, the different designs, the characteristics of each device, but having all of my games playable through one HDMI cord is all I ever want. Some people might say, Scott, just buy a PC and get into PC gaming. Yeah, sure, when I learn the error of my ways. It's just so annoying that you have this one console that tries to be the all-in-one experience of bringing together the entire lineage of a company's library of games for previous consoles, to just have their next console throw it all away. In some cases, it makes total sense. The Nintendo Switch doesn't play Wii U discs. If it did, that would be horrifying. But many times, it just kind of feels like either a really stupid oversight, a lack of respect for history, or an excuse to resell old games. And the cries for backwards compatibility have been around for a while. Atari released the Atari 2600 and followed it up with the Atari 5200, an upgraded console that was bigger in every way and couldn't play your old 2600 games. Yes, buy this newer console in 1982 that has fewer games than your current one, and the games it does have are just updated versions of the games you already own. It may have better graphics, but why were you buying Atari for graphics? It was 1982, the word graphics wasn't invented yet. It was especially pathetic that Atari's new console couldn't play old Atari games when the competition was releasing adapters that allowed you to play old Atari games on their machines. Legal? Not really, but it wasn't strictly illegal.
That's a bonus.
This was the Peach Fuzz era of game consoles. Nobody knew where things lied legally, so the ColecoVision and Intellivision both had adapters you could buy that played most Atari 2600 games. Well, Atari couldn't just look pathetic. They were Atari! So they released their own adapter for the Atari 5200 that played Atari 2600 games, and it only worked with certain models of the 5200. Imagine if this banana was the Atari 5200. Sure, using cartridge adapters was a way to get backwards compatibility, but it's just clunky. You wish you could just plug every cartridge into the same slot. Having an adapter on standby isn't that much more convenient than just keeping the old console. Well, Atari fixed quite a bit with their next system, the Atari 7800, basically what the 5200 should have been all along. It wasn't backwards compatible with the 5200, but was backwards compatible with the 2600. So now you can play all your Atari 2600 games in 1986. God. The 7800 credit, it was the first console with backwards compatibility built in without needing cartridge adapters, but by the time it came out, who cared? The problem with doing backwards compatibility this way meant the cartridges for your new system had to be shaped exactly like the old ones, or else you'd have to make 2 different cartridge slots. And that would just simply drive up cost, because you see, backwards compatibility may not be included with many consoles due to how much it would take to cram an old console into this new console. So that's why back in the day, many companies opted for the adapter route, like Sega. The Sega Master System happened, we just have to accept it. And when Sega started work on their next console, the Sega Genesis, did they really want to include a Master System cartridge and card slot on this new system? I mean, that would be nice, but the Master System wasn't the biggest success. Hearing that the Genesis could play the existing Master System library,
I would be thrilled if I knew what that meant.
So Sega decided to release an adapter instead, the Power Base Converter. Plug this into the cartridge slot and we can actually play the majority of the Master System library on the Genesis. So what, like 4 games? Weirdly enough, the Genesis has all the hardware to play Master System games baked inside, it just doesn't have the cartridge and card slots. This only truly works with the Genesis Model 1, though with some finagling you can get it to work on the Model 2, and over in Europe a redesigned converter was released that works with this model, and then the Model 3 is only compatible with, nothing. The Super Nintendo was supposed to have backwards compatibility with the NES in some form, whether a cartridge adapter or actually being included via the console itself, but Nintendo didn't want people to evolve that quickly. Many were a bit miffed that they couldn't play their old games on the SNES, but that didn't stop them from really digging shit. I think this was a true testament to the power of backwards compatibility. The Sega Genesis had it via an adapter, the Super Nintendo sold more. The Atari 7800 had it built in, nobody cared. It's a great feature, but it obviously doesn't affect sales all too much. Though if you really wanted to play older games through your SNES, you had options. The Super Game Boy allowed you to play Game Boy games on the system. Not sure if this really counts as backwards compatibility since the Game Boy is handheld, more so an outlet for the Super Nintendo to express itself. This is awesome. It's great to be able to play these games via a method that doesn't stink. But of course, it only plays Game Boy games. What about Game Boy Color games? Well, the same year the Game Boy Color released, in Japan only, Nintendo released an updated Super Game Boy, the Super Game Boy 2. It could play Game Boy games and now had the ability to hook up a link cable to play multiplayer Game Boy games. Finally! And if you really wanted to play NES games on your SNES, there was an unlicensed adapter released, the Super 8 in 1995. Not a bad accessory considering it could play Japanese Super Famicom and Famicom games in addition to NES and SNES. Not fully ideal, I mean, it's unlicensed. The games don't run as good as they would be playing through the standard SNES slot or on a regular NES, but back in the day, this made things a bit more convenient. But this was when backwards compatibility came to a crashing halt. The mere fact game consoles moved over to CDs instead of cartridges meant there really weren't any feasible ways to incorporate support for the previous generation of consoles. Like, were you really going to include a cartridge slot on your fancy CD machine? Sega, you son of a bitch. Well, on the Sega Saturn, this is really only for stuff like memory cards, but it looks nearly the right size for something like a Sega Genesis cartridge. At least Nintendo stuck with cartridges, which meant they could totally make the Nintendo 64 compatible with the SNES. Totally. But with handhelds, man, these things were backwards compatible all the time. You couldn't stop these things from being backwards compatible. They were backwards compatible for breakfast. The Game Boy Color could play Game Boy games, the Neo Geo Pocket Color could play Neo Geo Pocket games, all Wonder Swans played Wonder Swan games, and hey, at least with the Nintendo 64, if you plug in the transfer pack, you can play Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow through Pokemon Stadium on the Nintendo 64 and nothing else, because just keep your old Super Nintendo to play the rest of your Game Boy games on the TV. This is the mentality that I hate. Like, is there any reason why I shouldn't be able to play Game Boy games on the Nintendo 64? I have to keep my Super Nintendo if I want to play it on the TV? Well, there was an adapter to play Game Boy Advance, Color, and Game Boy games, never made publicly available, called the Wide Boy 64, developed by Intelligent Systems for the Nintendo 64. This was pretty much used to test Game Boy games, play on a TV in competitions and in demo stations. It's crazy this was never turned into a retail product, but just keep your Super Nintendo, you dumb bitch. Backwards compatibility was almost always a conversation point with consoles that never ended up even going that route. I believe Sega considered giving the Dreamcast the ability to play Sega Saturn games. Why wouldn't they do that? Well, why would you say your console can play a Ghost? But with the Saturn only truly being very popular in Japan, they might have played around with the idea of the Japanese Dreamcast being the only model compatible with Saturn games. Nothing about that sounds even close to a good idea, which means it must have been a Sega idea. And then when the Dreamcast was about to explode, Sega tried to get Microsoft to include Dreamcast compatibility on the Xbox. See, that would have been cool, but it's just sort of weird. Like, oh, the Xbox is compatible with this entirely separate game company's games from a completely different game console. It's just natural. What do you mean the Wii won't play Betamax? The Game Boy Advance, of course, could play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games on it, now with black borders free of charge. You can even change the aspect ratio if you're a creep. Of course, the old cartridges really like to make sure you know you're playing them. These things stick out so hard, everybody on the bus will know what you're doing. Thankfully, the GameCube brought back full-blown Game Boy support with the Game Boy Player. You may not have been able to play Nintendo 64 cartridges on this thing, but you could play nearly all Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games. Except the Game Boy Advance video cartridges. We were so close to a new tomorrow. They just wouldn't work. Of course, this was to stop you from recording these videos onto a VHS tape and distributing them. The market for VHSs have all grown up. Volume 1, huge. Now with the PlayStation consoles, these were notoriously backwards compatible. The PlayStation 2 could play nearly all PlayStation 1 games. You could even use the same controllers and memory cards. And with the PlayStation 3, that was designed to be the ultimate thing. PS1 and PS2 games were set to be playable on specific models. All PS3s could play PS1 games, not all PS3s could play PS2. And then they stopped producing PS2 compatible PS3 systems entirely. At least PS1 was supported all the way through, but God, what a mess. The Nintendo DS could play Game Boy Advance games, only Game Boy Advance games. You know, to think of it, the Game Boy Micro had that limitation as well. No Game Boy or Game Boy Color support. And though to be fair, those cartridges were like 5 times the size of that thing, so made sense. The DS had 2 cartridge slots, one for DS games and one for GBA games. The inclusion of a GBA slot felt more like an escape plan though. Like, hey, if the DS doesn't do well, we can still sell it as a Game Boy Advance. When they revised the DS with the Nintendo DS Lite, the GBA slot remained, but now the games stuck out like how games stick out on a DS Lite. It was pretty bad. And then with the Nintendo DSi going forward, they removed the GBA slot. Why? Because they ran out of holes to put here. The Xbox 360 was set to be as backwards compatible with the original Xbox as possible. How did they do? 461 out of 1001 ain't bad. So what's the deal with this? Well, the Xbox 360 doesn't have that original Xbox spunk baked into it. Instead, Microsoft decided to update the 360 gradually throughout its life to enable support for specific older titles to run via emulation. At the end of the day, roughly half the library is supported. Not terrible, not amazing, definitely Microsoft. Playing these games on 360 works, and many of them look much better being played here, though there are various technical problems with quite a handful of them. I've never come across anything unplayable. The game supported work well enough, but Microsoft ended adding original Xbox games to the 360 about halfway through the system's life. That's something you notice with the backwards compatibility. The companies just give up. The Wii, GameCube support, the whole 9 yards, 4 controller ports and 2 memory card slots. To the 80-year-olds who bought a Wii for Wii Sports, I'm sure these ports horrified them. Of course, it doesn't work with the Game Boy Player. As a kid, I was adamant these two could connect in some way, and because of that, my picture's still up at Nintendo customer support. But then with future revisions of the Wii, they stripped them of all things GameCube. Obviously to cut costs, but everybody freaked out when they did this. Even though the people freaking out already owned a Wii with GameCube support at this point. At least the Wii U always had support for Wii games, though its method of doing so was pretty clunky. You'd have to enter Wii mode to play Wii games. The system basically turned off and back on again, and bam, it's a Wii now. I mean, it works, and Wii games look really good running on a Wii U. But it is just unbelievably clunky to have to go into a completely separate mode of the system to play Wii games. Like, sure, that means most games will have full compatibility if you have the whole Wii menu set up and whatnot, but it's just weird. Like, oh man, can I access the Wii U system settings through here? No, you're in Wii mode now. The Nintendo 3DS always had support for DS games, which is a godsend. They look kinda foggy on the original model, but look pretty slick on later ones. I was surprised it didn't pull a GBA on the Nintendo DSi and remove compatibility for the DS later on. Like, why? The DS cards fit in the 3DS card slot. They would have had no reason to do it, but that's the Nintendo way.
See you soon.
5 breadsticks for my triple treat. 3 layers deep, 10 Cinnabon mini rolls to eat, and the pizza plus another pizza.
The triple treat box, only from Pizza Hut.
Freeze drive ritual!
What's the recipe for surprising the kids, treating yourself, and ditching dish duty? You're looking at it. Order your Pizza Hut faves like original pan, original stuffed crust, and more at pizzahut.com. No one out-pizzas the Hut.
But see, with the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, backwards compatibility was no more. It was announced pretty early on they wanted to shift over to a completely new architecture, and thus it would be incredibly costly to build in compatibility like that into these consoles. So like, I get it. It takes a lot of research and development to ensure all these old games work perfectly on the new system. Plus with the PS3, that was Funk City. It's incredibly hard to play PS3 games on anything but a PS3. So it made sense Sony didn't make that a priority. Because when backwards compatibility is offered, barely anybody takes advantage of it. People go, sweet, and then proceed to just play new games from there on out. It's a great selling point on the back of the box. Like I said, it's nice knowing all your old works on all your new, but it doesn't mean that much more than that to most people. But since the PS4 couldn't play any older games, the lack of backwards compatibility meant re-releases. They could repackage PS3 games on PS4 and make so much more money. I don't think that was the core reason why they didn't try to do backwards compatibility, but it probably persuaded them to not do it that much more. Oh, the PS4 can't play PS3 games? Oops. I like re-releases because they give companies an excuse to put together the definitive release of a title with all the DLC and the best graphics and the stupidest box art. It was just funny to me how some of these were called remastered editions when the original release came out like yesterday. The Last of Us Remastered a year after it came out, but somehow the Xbox actually did something right. In 2015, it was announced the Xbox One was actually becoming backwards compatible with Xbox 360 after all, and in 2017, the original Xbox was added to the fray. The way they did it was somewhat similar to the Xbox 360's backwards compatibility. Over time, certain older games were added to the support list, but this time, they were ensuring each and every one was as optimized for the Xbox One as possible. Many backwards compatible games look and run so much better on Xbox One than they ever did on 360 or the original Xbox. The main issue here is, again, not all titles are supported, especially with the original Xbox. You can use the original discs, but that just unlocks a downloadable version of the game. Nothing's playing off the disc here. So that means you have to download this game to your hard drive, more space is being used up on your console. However, it's great to have backwards compatibility at all, even if it's just a bit limited. Over on the PlayStation 4, you can stream PlayStation 3 games through PlayStation Now, but nobody gives a and at least with the PlayStation 5 and 4th generation of Xbox, they are nearly fully backwards compatible with PS4 and Xbox One, which is exactly what I like to see. But going over the history of this stuff really hits home how much most companies and customers for that matter just don't care. It's really unfortunate, but the PS4 didn't have backwards compatibility, and it made the Xbox One say uncle. The Wii U had backwards compatibility, the Nintendo Switch didn't. What happened? The world's worst riddle. But hey, there is a little thing called forwards backwards compatibility. I have this adapter to play Game Boy Advance on the Super Nintendo. This is amazing and stupid. And hey, a Genesis adapter for the Super Nintendo. Crossbreeding is finally in. Backwards compatibility is something that just doesn't get enough attention in the gaming industry. Most people don't care about it, it's obvious. Most of the best-selling consoles each generation don't include backwards compatibility. It's not a selling point to most people, and thus, most companies decide against including it. It's always appreciated, seldom utilized, and I think I just have to accept the fact that I'm never gonna get that all-in-one box I always wanted. There's always gonna be something holding backwards compatibility backwards. And you know what? I've moved on. I don't need that box, and I've also let go of the past. I sold 3 of my Wii U's. If only something was backwards compatible with it.